Brought to you by Lord Carnage and the best of classic game room. What do Rambo, a DeLorean, Duran Duran, and the Vic Viper spaceship all have in common? Other than the fact that all those things are awesome, they all have something to do with 1985, because when you think about pop culture in 1985, a whole lot happened. The last James Bond film featuring Roger Moore, A View to a Kill, was released with Duran Duran singing the title theme, which happens to be my favorite Bond theme. The original Back to the Future movie came out in theaters that year. Rambo First Blood Part 2 came out in 1985. And the first Gradius debuted in the arcades in Japan that year. Oh, there was also a Godzilla movie, Godzilla 1985. Can't believe I forgot that one. Sadly, I wasn't playing video games in Japanese arcades in 1985, but if you were, you could have been singing along to Huey Lewis and the News and The Power of Love while destroying aliens in the Vic Viper spaceship for the first time. I did play Gradius frequently on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and that's what we're looking at here. Gradius is one of the most popular, entertaining, lasting, fun, challenging spaceship side-scrolling shoot-'em-ups ever created. I spent more time in the last few years playing Gradius 5 on the PlayStation 2, so it's a lot of fun to go back and revisit the first one. Gradius gameplay, as you can see on screen, is solid, traditional side-scrolling action. The controls on the NES are fantastic. Graphically, the game looks very nice. I'll break this into a two-part review and just lay out some of the basics here, then we'll get into some of the challenging later levels in Part 2. Rather than picking up various weapons floating around in space, you upgrade your weapon by picking up power-ups after destroying various enemies. You can give yourself a two-shot or a laser beam. There's the familiar options, which are those little red things that you can gain, and they help to increase your firepower. You can get a shield. And as you collect these power-up things in space, you choose when to activate them or when to cash them in, whatever you want to call it. You can also use the power-ups to increase your speed numerous times, and when your ship is destroyed, you then lose all your power-ups and your speed upgrades, so you become a very slow, weak Vic Viper, which is where much of the challenge in the game comes from, because you really don't want to get destroyed. When I play this game, I tend to find myself upgrading everything in the first two levels and then keeping the shield on standby so that when I lose my shield, I have 6 upgrades or 6 power-ups ready to go on the bottom. Then I just activate it and get another shield. The game may look simple in some respects, but actually it's quite challenging and does require strategy. You have to know when to use certain weapons. It's the kind of game where you definitely get an advantage the more you play it and the more you memorize. In part 2 of the review, we'll look at some of the later levels and some of the stuff that makes Gradius a lasting series today. Some 20 years after the debut in the arcades, Gradius games are still being released, and it remains one of the most popular side-scrolling shooting series in existence. If not the most popular. It's hard for me to say because I like them all. When you look at the Thunder Force series and R-Type games and Gradius games, it's hard to determine what's the best because they're all so much fun to play. They all have their slight differences, even though they may be two-dimensional, for the most part, two-dimensional side-scrolling video games. We'll continue the review here in Part 2. in some of the later levels as I continue piloting the Vic Viper spaceship and remember some of the strategy to get through these parts. I highly recommend the first Gradius on the NES, as well as any of the other versions and sequels out there. They're excellent games, and if you like spaceship shooters, they are a must-play. The best of Classic Game Room is on DVD, Blu-ray, and Laser Hyper Vision album set.